let's look at the scaling phase. So when we look at this from the aspect of the startup development phases, we have covered now the formation and validation, and just as on the previous modules, basically when you are entering into a growth phase, a scaling phase, it basically means that you are free to forget and not worry majority of the things from the past activities, but you still have, of course, all of the things that you produce and all of the learnings that you gain on how to do validation. You have the mission, vision, strategy, all the outputs out of these previous phases as your tools when you're entering to the growth phase. But basically what it means when you enter in a new phase, that you need to find a new mindset, you need to kind of design a new behavior for the organization and focus on new aspects than in the previous modules. So of course scaling is all about taking your validated product and validated business model, your validated team to real markets and start to expand on that and really grow that from different aspects instead of just continuing to validate the product. Of course, at the same time, you are expanding the product, adding new features or creating new future versions or even complementary products and so forth. But all of that should happen only in context or around or in addition to something that is already validated, like the minimum viable product of market working product in a minimum way. So basically here in scaling phase is all about starting to build the organization versus just the business side or the product side. So in the formation phase, we'll focus a lot on the initial team and the market and the customer. On the validation, we are focusing clearly to match the market and the customer with a real product or offering. And then on the growth, we'll focus on taking that to market, and basically it gets back to building the team into an organization and running that organization as well. So why do we use these development phases? It really helps to bring guided focus. So instead of having multiple balls in the air, which you still will have, but at least you know whether you should have red color balls in your hands or blue color balls in your hand and not all the different colors and everything in the air at the same time. It helps you to give you some general milestones. It helps you to give some progress measure, and it really helps you to get more logic into the order of things, how you need to build something out of nothing. And it also helps to those who have experienced or have built the companies before, to give a framework and a tool for all the trainers, mentors, advisors to also communicate different things, and also the benefits or pros and cons of doing different things at different phases. Because basically a right advice given or deployed at the wrong development phase can actually become a wrong advice. So it's important to understand what type of activities and what type of things are most relevant in these different development phases. And it also means that if there isn't the foundational things in place, if there aren't the types of things that need to be in place before entering or before thinking of growing the business, it basically means that it's trying to grow without realistically having the ability to grow, which is a path to failure. So of course, if you try to do something without the necessary tools or skills, it's very unlikely that you will actually succeed. So of course, if you don't even know what those tools are, or if you don't know what that ability requires, then it's very hard to even put those things in place, and then you would be potentially failing without even knowing why. So when we look at this through these development phases and just looking all of the different aspects that can be done, and we compare that with the failure factor of premature scaling, it basically leads to things that if knowing all the types of things that need to happen in a successful venture, and then trying to just get and skip a lot of steps along the way, it basically means that the risk keeps getting higher and higher the more steps you skip, and the more it may mean that you have to actually come back to the starting point or start pedaling back or taking multiple steps back to go and fix those before you will have the ability to grow. So it may lead that the things will move much slower in the beginning, but at the end of the day, there is much more ability to grow. So this is really the perspective into these development phases and the use of it. So when we look at building a startup, it's very much overlooked how much effort actually goes into building the whole thing. Majority of new entrepreneurs and majority of the support functions also basically focus, and the knowledge that are shared there basically focus on the product and the market side and the customer side and so forth. But very little is focused and kind of understanding of how much effort and how much support would actually be also needed in the side of building the actual team and building an actual organization and building the actual company that runs that product or service in the markets. So that's the less sexy part. That's the less visible part. It's much more boring side to majority of innovators. But at the same time, in fact, that is the reason why also many companies fail. Because with good team and good organization, you can always re-innovate, and you can pivot, and you can keep changing the products along the way. But it's much harder the other way around. That if you're only trying new business ideas and every time you're trying to build a team and the organization behind that it's much slower process. And if you don't learn that is a factor for the success, then even with the successful product or service, you may end up failing the business. When we look at the startup development in the context of support functions and through these steps, it's key that in the beginning to focus on acquiring the necessary knowledge as a founder and a founder team, what is going to be needed in the developing the whole startup from all the different aspects. And when getting now into the scaling phase, it becomes much more important to then look at all the resources, money, additional team members, connections, partners, channels, and many other aspects, because now it's really taking that product and service to the markets through different channels and means. At the same time, in the earlier phases, typically there's a lot of public services and public funding, grant funding, support activities, mentoring. Majority of those are free or very affordable. Also, you are, even from the private side, you are getting a lot of free tools, channels, or pay-per-cost type of solutions to be able to do a majority of the beginning part pretty much for free or at very low cost, if you exclude the cost of team members, which should be there because of the equity not to be paid with salary initially. And then on the scaling phase, it becomes much more private service providers, investors, bigger companies, those who are already more in the markets, to partner with them, or leveraging the different industry channels and different industry connections and forums and places and networks to really scale the business. So this becomes very much then also focused into the business vertical or business function that you are looking to take to the market, and in industry related opportunities. So if we just look at the word scaling, what does it mean? It's basically, here's a good kind of short description. Scaling is about a system whose performance improves once it acquires resources in a proportion to the capacity added. So basically, it is a system. It is a engine of sort, and that if just more resources are added, it should be able to produce more. So now you have to think of that if you just if you think about your company at the present state and you would just add more money to your bank account, how would that money be used? Do you have a fixed system that you put money here, you put $10 there, and $15 comes out on the other end? What is that process in between that you know that that's how it works? If you put more people sitting in your office, is it clear how they would actually, what would they start to do, what they would start to execute, what existing models or processes that would automatically start to that they could produce more value to the market or more results. So the scaling phase is all about coming up and understanding of how to create these things and how to consider these aspects. So when in the ideation, formation phases and on the validation phase, it's all about flexibility. It's all about using business model canvas. It's all about doing MVPs, being very agile. And the reason for that flexibility is to really be able to test many things, because basically it means that majority of things are not validated. You don't know what works, so you have to have a very flexible model, efficient, flexible model to test as many things as possible. But once you get and start to find what works, now it's all about becoming boring in a certain sense and start really repeating those things that work. So basically, if we think about managing the operations with very hands-on involvement, founders will eventually limit their own growth. At the same time, if one would distance themselves from the hands-on involvement but don't have any means of running that engine, then of course that wouldn't help to grow either. So just giving responsibility to others doesn't automatically make it grow. So that means that if a company is going to scale, the management, basically the founders or whoever is at the management at this point, need to implement standardized and repeatable process with the proper delegation. So it's a combination of procedures, tactics, processes, models, and attached measures for those who understand the business, who have basically built the business to be able to see that the engine is running correctly. So all of the learnings need to be put in a format that others can also execute them, perhaps improve them, but in a way where those who are managing and running the company can also understand from the measures how the company is being running. So basically it means like getting from this very hands-on feeling, you have the gut feeling here, you have the engine in the back, it's pushing you forward, and you have understood the basic of why any flying device can fly, and you can feel all the different movements through your body, very hands-on experience. When you pull or push that, or you move it side to side, and you feel the weight underneath, and you feel the wind in your face. This is very manual operations, but you know, when you understand the basics and you apply them and you fly with this kind of device, you feel and know and see how it is flying and why it is flying and where it is flying and so forth. But when you think of the bigger company, it becomes a very different thing. So you have very limited view what's ahead, and you have to be able to fly through different weathers. You have to be able to fly in context of other planes, so you need radar systems. You really don't have so much of a gut feeling whether it's flying or not. You probably have seen some of the flight investigation, where they examine why some accidents happen with flights, and in certain situations the pilots felt that it was actually flying if the meters were giving wrong signals, but it actually was dropping. So basically, to run your business, you have to learn to run it through the measures, the meters, the KPIs, and you have to trust that the processes, what happens between each of the movement, that they actually happen also externally. So now you have all the different things in between, but you're still flying and you are still making those movements, but you are now doing it with very different type of approach. So it basically means that to getting from here to there is what you need to build for your company. And then if we think about the supporting ecosystem in context, is of course that there are those who are helping you to land to a new market. There are those who are helping you to exit, to go to different markets. There are those who help you to refuel. There are those who help you to get rest and get prepared. And there are even those who can help you to run your company if you build the management team and everything step by step. And at the same time, when you enter in the different markets, you could always assume and expect that in most markets there are support organizations, there are ecosystems that can help you to land and do business also in another market. So from this analogy, hopefully this gives some ideas and perspective into how you should really think about your company and your business in the context of markets as well. So before taking a deeper dive, let's do a checkpoint here of the types of things that you should already have prepared from the previous development phases, whether with the help of the materials we have, or in general how you have arrived here with your business. So before you go into the scaling phase, you should have a very clear company mission, a clear vision where, so a clear mission, what value are you providing and to whom, a clear vision where the company is heading, where the company should be envisioned in 10 years time, a strategy, a general strategy framework, a very top level strategy framework, how you are navigating in that mission towards that vision. And you should have a set of guiding principles and values for how the company should be run, like what type of people, what the company should represent, what it can do, what it can't do, what it should do, what it shouldn't do, and so forth. And you should have a updated roadmap. Where are you now today in your roadmap from the beginning or previous stages? In what milestone you have achieved now that is justifying you to move to the next phase, and what are the updated milestones? Review your milestones and what those are towards the vision. You should have a clearly validated team, a team that can execute to really be ready to go to the scaling phase, at least in a ability that they have full commitment, they have the types of skills and attitude required, and they can also help to carry the company culture and values forward when they take on more people that they work with, when they are scaling their own activities and delegating their own activities to new team members. There should be already market validated product or service, the whole offering for the customers. So basically those that your mission is focused on. And you should have initial business model in place, or at least chosen. So that depends on what is your kind of resourcing plan and what is your vision and ambition, because it may be that you will only focus on the more detailed business model later on. So if you are more bootstrapping, you should already have a clear business model in place. If you are more on the investor path and there's a clear traction, and you decide to choose the strategy of going with investors and figuring out the business model later on, and just focusing on market share and market presence while scaling, that's a strategy as well. So the business model is dependent on also the chosen growth strategy. And you should have the basic KPIs in place and KPIs for what are going to be used, identified. And we are going to start focusing more on those in this module. And really, if you don't have these different aspects in place, do not start to grow. Don't go into growth mode, even if there would be a good market demand. Just try to accelerate on getting all the things in place that you are still missing before going to that scaling phase. It's not going to get any easier to do the foundational things and the things that you are currently missing later on when you scale with the business. That is exactly what the premature scaling is to moving with the aspect, even if the market is there. If you start to acquire more business than what you can handle, it starts to backfire in the way of not being able to support, not being able to deliver, starts to eat into your reputation and so forth. So don't expect that you can just somehow magically fix the things later on if you have not been able to get them done by now. So that is an aspect to really consider. As a mentor and advisor, I oftentimes saw too many of these cases that whether they had a bad situation or they had an extremely good situation from business or financial perspective, they still were struggling to grow simply because they had skipped those steps and they basically didn't have the ability to grow, and some of them even didn't know what they can do to fix these things later. And the reality is that some of these things are very difficult to fix later on. For example, if you have poorly distributed the ownership and there isn't a good shareholder agreement in place, and you get founder issues, or you don't have alignment, you're missing core team members, you have too much of an ownership for other people to care about your business growth, and at the same time you are losing your own strength, or maybe you're getting sick or whatnot, it's very hard to find someone to balance that growth. Or you are just simply missing all of the things that we are looking to go through in this module to cover what you should prepare for the scaling phase. And basically, you're running you are flying that big plane or bigger plane with the same type of gut feeling, trying to run around the plane and to adjust the wings and everything manually. So you can get the analogy that it's not going to be fun and it's not going to really work, and the risk of failure is very high, regardless of how much money you would be making, because the money automatically doesn't convert into people knowing what to do and finding people to care and so forth. And after this module, you should have really the growth focused key performance indicators, the KPIs, validated, so that you know that the meters that you are looking are actually right meters for your business, and you actually know that they are connected to real processes and real business activities. You should have initial growth strategies chosen and in use. So you should have base set of strategies related to growth and scaling in place. Of course, all of these should be documented, and you should periodically look at those and keep updating them based on the learnings of you and different team members and the whole organization. You should have clearly the operative work where the things are being executed, where the strategies are being executed and put in place, separated and in good balance with the actual strategy work, where new ideas and new tactics are put in place because of the market changes, the competition situation changes, the ambition levels change with the new learnings and whatnot, to make changes on how things are operated. But those should have a clear separation and balance in place. You should have growing financial resources, so you should have, because of the validation that there is real demand on the market, hopefully there's market pull, so the market is really pulling. This depends on the market timing as well, or you're still pushing, but you clearly see that the market is emerging and growing. Because of that, you should have growing financial resources. So having more and more financials, either from investors or from revenues or other opportunities to lend money and so forth, to do more of what you know. If putting those financial resources in, applying to those, you know, they will actually bring you even more financial resources to scale the business. You should have defined and have key business processes in place and improving. So basically you should have those in place and documented and in use, and basically being improved along the way as the processes are operated. And because of all of this, you should also have accelerating growth. So basically with the growth ambition and the scalability in the business model and the constant improving of different things, you should be able to keep accelerating your growth, as long as you have positioned that in a big or a growing market, and you clearly have a competitive new value producing innovation that you're pushing to the markets. So now let's go through the really key principles, and this cannot be highlighted enough. So we'll go through this really with the business logic. So the whole point of scaling is that you are able to come up with repeatable models that work, that are known to work, and because of that, those can be taught and document it to others to execute and to improve. So basically, this very much means that it's not a random process, but a very systematic one. If you're doing random all the time, that let's try this, let's try that, or you do random, on the fly sales pitch to different customer every time because you are very creative in the sales situation, you are good at reading people, but you don't know what works to specific type of customers and you don't have that documented, then basically the only way to scale would be to have similar talented people who are very creative at sales and always finds a way to do that. But at the same time, they end up selling a product that you can't deliver. So that's not a model how you can build. So it's not a random, but a systematic process, a systematic way, and in somewhat the execution actually can be what I call very boring at the same time. But the passion and the inspiration should come from the company mission and vision and not from the processes itself. The processes are there to execute the mission towards the vision. If you don't understand what you're working with at the moment, or if you don't understand what you are doing, why it works or why it doesn't work, it's very hard to develop. So basically you need to understand how the basics work and why do they work to be able to then also start giving good ideas and feedback of how those can be developed. And it's a good way that you may get if you are new to the team, it's very common that you come up with many new ideas or clearly see some things from the external perspective that how things could be done better. And that's a great start. Record, document all of those ideas, but then learn to understand why the current things are in place and why certain things are being done the way they are, and then cross-match your own findings in context of those to see whether those ideas are actually something to test. And then if so, start doing those or start testing, go with the other team members and go through those and prioritize them, how those should be put in place and see what the results would be. But don't just start changing things without first understanding why the current things are in place in the way they are put in place. Because typically there is real rationale behind there, or hopefully there should be real rationale behind there and real documented learnings. Of course, the markets and many things may change and most likely have changed that require new approaches. So it's totally common also that these things need to be developed. But it's clear to be able to have a balance with understanding before developing. And then finally, related to when you are improving things, when you are actually developing things, whether that's a process, whether that's a product, whether that's a customer profile, whatever that may be, if it can't be measured, it basically can't be measured if it was improved. So therefore, if it can't be measured, it can't be improved because you don't know what better is. So that means that there should be a starting measure, and then there should be a measure after something was changed to see whether it improved or actually made things worse. And if there is no measures in place, it basically means that now if you are flying that big plane and you just put more power to it, what happens? So does it just go faster? Is it climbing, or is it not climbing, or is it actually going sideways? What's happening? So you have to have these measures to see what happens when you make changes. And even now, when we are coming out of the validation phase, where we were focused on specifically to creating the product and doing the validation, The validation is still a very relevant concept, and the speed of iteration and validation cycle is key, also at growth phase, but it doesn't apply to everything all the time. So now it becomes more that those things that are known to work, you have many things that you need to build when you're on the scaling phase. So basically it means that how quickly you can test and iterate and validate new processes or changes to the processes, changes to the advertising channels, changes to the sales materials, changes to brochure, changes to the website, whatever that is. The faster you can iterate, validate, and improve, it's still a very important concept. But at the same time, you have to separate what you are building and then the new elements or the change elements, and the balance between making decisions on change and improvement versus running with what is already working.